Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. This is our second online workshop slash webinar, and we're building on the first one, which was focused on the customer supply chain teams of the future and how they're evolving today. And today's focus is actually on a topic that's super important for suppliers, which is on-shelf availability. And what we've done over the past 3 months is spoken to a lot of suppliers, particularly on the sales side, the customer supply chain teams, and also on the retail operations teams to really get a better understanding of how they're seeing the state of on-shelf availability. Where are some of the challenges? Where are some of the areas where they're making some progress? And then where are some areas where there are challenges, but there isn't any being progress being made? And you know, I think for us, one of the key things is being able to bring all of these key topics to the center of the room so we can have these conversations and have these discussions and in a collaborative way, find ways to move our industry forward. So let's get started without further ado. Brennan, do you want to give a little overview of yourself for the audience that might not remember you from the first workshop?
Hi, everyone. Brennan Stoufflet, current Director of CPFR at bops. Been in role for maybe 9 months now, with background in several CPG organizations, including most recently Kimberly-Clark, as one of the team leaders for customer supply chain with Sam's and Walmart. Then also did a global capability job with Kimberly-Clark, and then rewinding, unpacking, whether it be my start with Kraft Foods and customer service and demand planning and CPFR analysts, then team leader roles with Walmart International and the Dollar Channel with SC Johnson. So um, with today, more focus will be on how do we bring multiple teams together to achieve the ultimate outcome, which is having product on the shelf available for the consumer at the moment of purchase.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Brennan. And I'm Usman. I lead the go-to-market function at Bops, and I work very closely with Brennan to build our community in Northwest Arkansas and a few other cities where we're really focused on in 2025. All right, moving right along. So, Brennan, one common theme that I saw when we were having these conversations over the past 3 months was it was very difficult for these teams to land on a clear definition of what on-shelf availability is. Even though this has been a problem that's been nagging the industry for quite a while, there's a lot of misconceptions and sometimes lack of clarity in terms of what on-shelf availability is. So let's take a moment let's take a moment before we dive into the data to just define what OSA is. You want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of us understand this concept, but there are the same terms used interchangeably sometimes, maybe accurately at times, but others it could be causing more confusion than what it's worth. In this instance, we'll talk physical stores and
Mhm.
also maybe you can call it digital on-shelf availability, but the final place of consumption or the moment of purchase by the consumer, is it available for the consumer to purchase it? In this instance, we'll use a store and say, when you go to the store, is the product actually in the intended location and you find it and it's actually there? I know
Mhm.
there's some nuance with regards to maybe the digital storefront, where the it's multiple things, not just the physicalness of it being at a warehouse and available to ship to a consumer, but that the URL is accurately reflecting a buy button.
Mhm.
We know those are some differences there, but today we'll focus mainly on the physical attributions of stores in this instance. And then in stock is where each retailer, where maybe Home Depot calls it in stock to sales, maybe there's a slightly different math that's regarded here. The example we have here is saying, hey, the number of products that you have in the store, is it able to have greater than 1 day of forecasted demand? This is typically the Walmart definition that's here, but you can substitute the definition of in stock. This is just the calculation of data. Is
Yeah.
it there? Not checking to go, is it physically available for the consumer to purchase, but the on-hand inventory count at that store would indicate that you have product or you don't. Some may be, if you have product, that means you're in stock. In this instance, we're saying you have to have at least a daily demand count to count as in stock, as the example shared here. So that's the delineation between the two.
I love it. And I want to give a quick shout out to Michael Grain, who is a close advisor of bops, and he's the preeminent OSA expert in the industry. He's the one who's always emphasized, hey, let's make sure we have a common definition and a common language around OSA when we're talking about it. So I wanted to make sure if Mike is watching that we're definitely listening to his to his advice. All right, let's dive into some of the data that we've seen over the past 3 months, Brendan. So the first the first point was focused on the people aspect. If we're looking at this from a framework of people, process, technology, and data, on the people aspect, we wanted to see if there was a huge challenge around the internal collaboration or lack thereof between teams, or whether maybe there was something else that really stood out for for these teams in terms of their biggest challenge for solving OSA. Surprisingly, at least to me, and I want to get your perspective, the overwhelming response that we've seen is that the limitation of actual data and insights around OSA is what a lot of supplier teams see as their hardest challenge. But I want to get your perspective on how you're looking at this data, and maybe there's some things that are sort of underneath the hood that maybe is not visible as we're looking at these results.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for sharing, Usman. This what's interesting is that there is still opportunity,
Mhm.
and it's not maybe equally spread across. But if you think that there is two things that are driving it, whether they want to call it a retailer execution gap or a merchandiser execution gap, this is speaking to labor in a store,
Yeah.
right? So I think that is a current constraint. Even if you have data, you still need some level of execution to fully realize potential, but you can get some potential even without the labor, if you will, making a change. So I want to make that distinction. And then the other half is where I'd say limited OSA data and insights. I know those are grouped together. You mentioned wanting to get under the hood. I would want to
Mhm.
understand, hey, do you have access to the data, but you don't maybe download it and put it in a usable format for an analyst to do a story tell or to discover insights, or is it connecting the insights? Is it getting the data, connecting the insights, but then not being able to do anything with it or don't know how to do anything with it? So I think that's where I would want to get more. But
Mhm.
here it's really two buckets, right? Hey, in the store, and then hey, even before I talk about going in the store, uh, I can't even maybe get the data and the insights that I'm looking for yet.
I like it. I like the way that you bucketed. Just to summarize for our audience to kind of structure it, I think there's that component of within the four walls of the supplier of how how much access do you have to these OSA data, and then how are you actually leveraging that data to get insights from it? And then there's the second bucket of what's actually happening in the store, and how are you coordinating between this sort of internal lens and also the external execution, if you will. That's where we've seen a lot of the magic actually happen. Anything else on this question before we move on, Brennan?
Yep. Nothing else.
I love it. Let's keep moving forward. I'll let you drive the second one.
Yeah, go ahead. And I didn't know, Usman, if you wanted to, anyone that's joined, if you have questions or comments, certainly you can utilize the chat feature in Zoom to post your questions or comments, and we'll attempt to address those as well.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so this next question with what is your biggest challenge when collaborating across teams and on-shelf availability improvement? Would I won't say this is recurring from my experience in previous, but
Mhm.
interesting to know that these vary depending on the team with regards to maturity level.
Yeah.
maybe in a process at a particular location whenever we've met with a few clients. But there is some, if we go think the first question with regards to do you have the data and the insights? And even if you say yes to I have it or I don't, and let's say we work on these teams and we provide them, not we bops, but we in general, meaning as an industry, if it makes it, if those people have insights and data more easily just as a function of the whole industry,
Yep.
improves in this capability, you still have to do some more design, usually around process, right? And so to have the conflicting KPIs and goals is also something that's usually aligned with no clear ownership of on-shelf availability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're conflicting, that means that there isn't really a way to own not just a whole number, right? Meaning you should certainly have an instance where each commercial team, retail ops team, customer supply chain team should be held accountable to where they have the most influence to
Yeah.
impact that
Mm-hmm.
number, right? And then you should be aligned to that. Just like we are all usually inside of a CPG organization or brand held accountable to reaching a sales target.
Mm-hmm.
Within that sales target, each role has a different influence or different responsibility to achieve that outcome. So having on-shelf availability increase, all of us need to own that in order to meet our ultimate goal of meeting our total sales target. And this is where I say it's how do you define it? Well, you need some data for everyone to get some buy-in usually and trust that they can participate in improving it. And once you can define those processes of how they help, I think it starts to clear up some of the ownership of each section.
Mm-hmm.
However, even in this instance, I think the here it's repetitive in that the data certainly is an input to this for people to overcome. And now you're seeing this as a really big challenge for them to collaborate across teams. You can't really collaborate on influencing or making an insight change if your insight is 3-4 weeks old. So if
Exactly.
you get data that your third party merchandiser team went to these 400 stores 3 weeks ago, what am I going to do with that information as a supply chain analyst that would maybe be able to push a case? Well, I'm 3 weeks late. Yes, I can push a case, but I just lost 3 weeks of sales.
Mm-hmm.
So that real-time data impacts your ability to collaborate with one another. And then the silo teams is certainly one in which everyone means well and has the best of intentions. So a retail ops team wants to do the best to get the product on the shelf or check the tags, make sure it's in the right location. And then maybe they're finding repetitive outages in a series of stores, but that information may not be shared with the supply chain team in a way in which that's digestible and understood for them to say, hey, retail team, I think I can fix this with the headquarter replenishment team. And then that problem goes away or gets minimized and is no longer a priority within the operations and merchandising teams. So so I can see how we have to build better process across teams in order for us to know where does my process start and end, and how do I hand it off to another stakeholder in the joint process.
Got it. Got it. And Brennan, would you be able to speak to maybe one or two tactics or sort of insights that you've sort of learned either over your career or from conversations that we've had over the past couple of months in terms of if there's a supplier that's listening to this and it's resonating with them that what, my sales, my customer supply chain and my retail ops teams are not actually collaborating or don't have those processes that enable collaboration. What are some one or two quick wins or some steps that they can take to start that journey on that sort of corrective path?
Yeah, I think the first part is being able to have visual management, if you will. You have to align on what is happening, the data, the results. So have the first meetings to set up what is on shelf availability, what is in stock, Where are you seeing maybe inventory on hand and zero sales over a certain time period? That will resonate with both people understand maybe in this instance what I just defined as maybe a phantom inventory situation. Where you share a process that you both want to improve, that's where I would start. A very clear, clean group of examples. This allows you to define the goal and what you need to work together on. And once you start working together, then that's when you can broaden out and bring more processes and be more holistic to follow this more robust, mature model where everyone's working together and knows the rules of the road, knows that each person's um, attributes to what to bring, when to send information, how to digest the insights. So that's the first step. Pick something you both know about, grab the data, agree that the data is the same for both parties, and then solve one problem together is how I would start this ability to merge siloed teams into one broader organization.
I love it. I love it. The the next insight is very Walmart specific, and I want to be cognizant because I know there are some suppliers on the call that might be managing the relationship with a non-Walmart customer. But the reason why this one stands out to me, at least Brennan, is it connects back to the first question, right? Which was around, you know, limited data and insights being one of the big hurdles to improving OSA performance. And for us, one of the things that we saw over these past couple of months was that a lot of supplier teams, or specifically retail ops teams and sales teams, did not even have the visibility of what was available to them within the data portals from the customers. It's understandable because a lot of these teams are just super busy and inundated with fires that they have to put out on a daily basis. But this one really stood out to me. And maybe there's some folks in the audience who have worked with Neopix, but maybe Brennan, we can define, what Neopix is. Like, what exactly are we talking about here? And then obviously, going deeper into this insight, that we got.
Yeah, absolutely. With NeoPix, this is a measure that is specific to digital commerce within Walmart. However, with more, call it the half of the business that Walmart has done with Walmart Plus members. Walmart Plus members typically use their mobile device to create their grocery order. In this instance, that's where I'm going to narrow it to, or hardware, any of the item in the store. This is when a Walmart picker, labor employee, or the third party that they hire, for instance, we'll just call them Walmart pickers, go to a location and then they cannot find the item. Then they come back again and they have to substitute the item. Basically, your item was, in their view, not available, or on shelf availability was a 0 instead of a 1 in this instance, right? And so it's another data point where the retail link data and even the Volt app that they scan may say there are 4 on hand, but they can't find it.
Yeah.
So it's technically not there, but maybe they find it 2 hours later. Maybe that person might have been the problem. They couldn't find it. Doesn't mean it's not technically there. What I would say is that when your neopic percentage is vastly different than the items just like it in the same 8 feet set, then you start to uncover or find other problems, not just that the inventory might have been off, but
Mhm.
is that item, so it becomes an OSA, it becomes a item setup. It could be a myriad of reasons why this may have a neopic percentage that is different than others. But there are, since it's store specific, and these are happening quite often, especially for fast moving items. This is why I think it causes consternation or a difficulty in how do I include Neopix. I would view it as just like you want inventory every day and you have in-stock percentages, it would behoove everyone to put Neopic percentage, substitution percentage, right? These measures they're sharing with us should be just another column where we can put multiple data points together. So I think the first part is not using is assuming they even think it's beneficial. Number two, it's so detailed to stores, we know that the retailer isn't going to make a whole lot of changes at the store level. So it's ignore it, because if I ignore it, I won't even know the problem. Then is it worth me going figure out the problem? So I get the not using it. Basic is more what I'm describing. At a minimum, download it and put it in a file next to your items, maybe next to some other KPIs. Leading would be communicating with Walmart back and forth on how you can leverage the information to improve your category,
Yeah.
not just your items. So I think
Mm.
where you are creating visualizations, creating insights that you are finding off of the data and sharing them back with your both replenishment teams within merchandise operations, but also your sales organization sharing with the buyer, what you're finding is only going to help Walmart improve the quality of the data that they're sharing back. Because there's certainly some cons to this, because it could be that the DoorDash or Instacart picker is going so fast that it's easier for them to say it's not there and just pick the different ounce size or the same item in a different pack size. And the person accepts the substitute, and Walmart is fine with that. The sale is staying in the box, it's staying even in the brand, it's staying in the category, and everyone just moves on. But how often is this occurring? Everyone wants to know over time how that's happening, and you can be one of those suppliers to leverage that information.
I love it. I love it. And anything else on this point before we move on to sort of the key takeaways
Nope.
from today and this exercise as well?
Let's move on to the takeaways.
Let's do it. All right. I'll, I'll let you start off with the people. All yours.
Yeah, thanks. So as you can see, I think we try to broaden many of these webinars into some areas. I wouldn't say they're columns or buckets, but look at this. All of these things work together across people, process, technology, and data. And you'll learn some distinction between the two as we go. But for people, we saw in the results, look, when you're working in silos, it's incredibly difficult to achieve optimal performance on shelf availability. We all know that inherently, but what are we going to do? I think we have to build, as we go through here, you'll see you need stronger processes in order to start connecting people.
Mhm.
You're going to need data to build the processes for people to trust, right? And then how do you elevate that to be repetitive and sustainable is through the technology. But sticking on people, we know that the siloed teams then, if you don't have a way to coordinate with one another, it's very person oriented or team oriented, where when people shift or turn over, then it kind of falls apart. So you may achieve a decent siloed team process and you're doing pretty good. But what
Mhm.
about whenever there's natural, predictable disruption to those people, that those people get promoted or and in a positive way things happen? Then how do you keep the organization moving forward on this area? It becomes where you go through a cycle of a downturn and you have to build up the capability again. And I
Mhm.
think you'll see that with the people as well, not just the silo nature, but the without some joint KPI work and agreement, that you start to lose much of this over time.
I like it. And I think, on your point about predictability, there's also so much unpredictability these days. And I think having this structured way of looking at things versus, you know, a lot of the stuff that we've seen from CPG suppliers is there is a tendency of knowledge sharing that happens from some of the senior leaders to the younger team members, but that only happens on an ad hoc basis, or there's no sort of proper structure for it. And I think this in particular is a component that is a quick win of like just establishing processes where if you have a structure in place, if there is some sort of predictable or unpredictable disruption, you're really able to still maintain continuity versus have, like you said, a basically start from scratch situation and then
Yeah.
you back to square one.
Yeah, and I think this meant a lot of things, right? Like you can see where there's so much. How do you start? And here, even process starts that, right? We talked about Neopix, but like there's a new measure for Target with walk-in purchasability that combines what they used to have with out of stocks physically in the store, but now they're combining that with their internal measure of digital out of stocks and calling it one measure of walk-in purchasability, whether you're digital or you're a person live in the store, was it available for me to purchase at that moment? And so what do I do with it? Is the first thing is hey, do I know about this data set? Do I know the definition of it? Pull the data and start to talk to your internal organization about, hey, we have this new data set. Here's what I'm seeing. Let's start to make sense of it and build process over one thing at a time before trying to come with a big framework for how you're going to reshape three major organizations inside your team.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's the process start. And then for technology, we know that speed and how quick can you get to the insights? How do you connect, not just discover, but connect those insights to then storytell? Because you're ultimately going to have to influence both internal and external stakeholders to take actions based on your recommendations from the insights you find. So by yourself with your current tools may take you too long, and certainly you can't scale that capability in a meaningful way to make a demonstrative impact to your business. But what I would say is you don't need the technology to start.
Yeah.
You need to understanding to start one piece at a time. And as you start to see how this is tying together, then you start solving for what type of technology. And by technology, that can be Excel, that can be from Excel into Power BI, Tableau reporting inside your organization. It doesn't have to be you're having to partner with a third party to enable this.
I love it.
And
I love
then absolutely the data, this is where I mean, really the data that is coming from a retailer sharing information from a third party merchant that you're paying for, giving you the audit information. This is your internal other data sources that may point to why something is happening in the marketplace. And then there is the human element, but most of these retailers provide quite a bit of information on reorder points, inventory, you can then calculate days since last sale. There's a tons of information to start connecting that is already being shared by the retailer when you are usually a purchaser of their data. Now, if you're not a purchaser of their data, this gets a lot more complicated because without enough data, you are then manually having to go to every store to find out what's happening, right? But this
it.
is where we're saying in a data rich environment, you still may not have to send someone to the store because you have enough information to still tell an influential story.
Got it. I like that point, and Brennan, that's also a question that just came in into the Q&A section, which was around if I'm a supplier that doesn't necessarily have a big retail ops budget, or it's a seasonal business, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to just send people into the store throughout the year. Like, what can I do about still being able to have a pulse on my OSA performance and possibly improving it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see that the data, for instance, may tell you your inventory every day. So then
Mhm.
you'll know how many days on average does it take every store item combination to sell your product.
Yeah.
If there's 7 days for you to sell your product, how many days a week do you typically sell that item? One day, just on, right? Only mainly on Mondays, mainly on the weekends, two, three times a week, one time a month, four times a month. What percentage of your business sells more than 2 units on multiple days in a week? Meaning there are a lot of signals about, is your product performing as you would expect and where isn't it? That ties to, is your reorder points accurate? Is your forecasting for that store item combination accurate? How is it different from the items that you're performing and you would expect it to perform like all the other sister stores, if you will? Meaning this demographic for a store in location A is very similar to store 2 in location B. Their performance, whenever we did a line review, said they should both sell 5 units per store per week. Well, why is one growing to 5.5 and I'm down to 2 units per store per week? We thought it would be different. Well, multiply that out. Maybe you have 400 stores tied to other 400 stores. Now you start to see that you've got some poor performers. Why is that? And I think that you will discover that there are some parameters not allowing it to succeed, usually in the replenishment forecasting lane. And then add in, if it's Walmart, meal picks. Oh, I've got poor meal picks too at
Mhm.
those stores versus the good performing stores. Why is that
Exactly.
happening? Oh, is it just a bad operating store? That's something the retailer may be interested in. Why does my labor not perform worse in this category, right? Because it's probably not just your brand. It typically is the other brands around yours in the category may have that same negative performance. If you share that, now it becomes a category problem, not just a you problem.
I love that example, and I think it perfectly encapsulates two main points that I would like the audience to walk away with. One is you don't have to wait for perfection to kind of start seeing where the opportunities might be for improving performance when it comes to OSA or or your customer supply chain team. I think that's one. And the other one will be around how people process technology data all work together. Like we're not going to look at just one component and kind of see it as the be all and all solution and that's it. Technology certainly is not that. Processes certainly are not that, but a combination of people, process, technology, and data, I think that's kind of where the magic is. Do you have any other takeaways before we wrap it up really quickly?
No, this has been great, Usman. Thanks for allowing
Awesome.
me to participate today.
Of course, of course. And now, just to wrap it up, I think, this series has helped us get a lot of positive feedback from the supplier community. So there's a lot more online workshops, like this one coming along, in a couple of weeks and obviously throughout the year. If you're located in, in the US, I think New York, New Jersey, Arkansas, where have you, we're happy to kind of do these workshops, in person as well. That's something that we have planned. But I also recognize that we have audience from all over the world and LATAM in particular. So in that case, continue supporting us virtually, and we're happy to support you along the journey. As you're kind of redefining what supply chain collaboration looks like for your business and your partners. So thank you again for taking the time. We'll send the recording to everyone that signed up, so you're able to share it with your team members or re- rewatch it if you'd like. And then we'll also follow up with dates for the next online workshop and what that topic is going to be. So thanks a lot and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.